Hello and welcome back to video tutorial number 6 in our beginner's guide to Photoshop elements right here at freephotoshop.com. In the previous video we explored the working environment inside the full edit mode. In this video we're going to take a couple of photographs and make them look good using some of the more powerful features available inside Photoshop elements. We're going to start this tutorial as always inside the organizer. I'm going to come over here to the keyword tags panel and I'm going to expand the places category, and here we have a new keyword that I went ahead and added before I began recording called Cookham, and I'm going to select it, and we now have access to the one and only photograph in the catalogue that was taken in the little village of Cookham near Maidenhead in the UK. Now I'm going to make sure I have the image selected, and then I'll come up here to the editor menu and select the full edit mode like so. Now the only thing I want to do to this photograph is bring back some of those shadows, because at the moment they're incredibly dark, way too dark for how we want them to be in fact. So I'm going to come up here to the enhance menu, select adjust lighting, and then select this command right here, shadow highlight. Now this works in exactly the same way as it did in the quick fix mode when we were trying to fix the shadows around that dark lake image. The only difference is that we now have percentage values associated with the sliders. Now when we entered the command we got this default setting of 25% for the lighten shadows option, which as you can see has gone a good way into making this image look better. But I reckon we can take things just a little higher here, seeing as we're experiencing some extreme problems with this photograph. So I'm going to take the lighten shadow slider up to say 50%. No need to darken the highlights or change the mid-tone contrast. I'm just going to hit OK to accept these changes and we're done. Now to see the original image I'm going to press this undo button up here at the top of the screen, and then to show you the image inclusive of our changes I'll just hit this redo button, and it's really amazing just how far you can come with one simple command. Okay, I'm going to hit the organizer button at the top here because I want to go back to the organizer. And then I'm going to press this show all button up here to see all the images in the current catalogue. Then I'm going to come down here and find the lion stack that I created along with the original catalogue, and there it is. I'm going to expand the stack, and then I'll select this version of the lion right here, come up here to the editor menu and select the full edit mode, and that's going to place the lion image into the project bin down here. And now I can switch between the images by double left clicking on whichever one I want to work with. In this case let's just check out that lake image once again, and you can see just how amazing things look after that application of the shadow highlight command. Now I'm going to switch back to the lion image however, and there's nothing obviously wrong with this one, but using the power of Photoshop elements we are going to be able to make it look better. So I'm going to start things off here with Photoshop Elements' big powerful brightness contrast command that goes by the name of levels. It's a command that gives us the ability to modify levels of brightness, levels of contrast, and even levels of colour inside the photograph. So I want you to come up here to the enhance menu, select adjust lighting, and you may wonder why we're not using the brightness contrast command. After all, we do want to fix the brightness contrast of the photograph. Well, it all boils down to the power of this command, my fellow photoshoppers. Levels is a far more complicated command than the brightness contrast command here from the menu, and it's going to take you longer to feel comfortable using it, but ultimately it gives you far better results, and in my opinion is completely worth that extra work in trying to figure how levels actually works. Incidentally, if you want more information on levels, then you can check out my completely free 5-hour video series all about editing with the levels command, available right here on freephotoshop.com. Not all the videos will be relevant to Photoshop Elements because the series was recorded using the full version of Photoshop, but generally you're going to find the 5th and 6th videos helpful in that series, so check that one out if you're after more information. For now I'm going to go ahead and select levels, and we're opening up a static version of the levels command at this stage, meaning that any changes we make inside this command are going to be added to the layer over here in the layers palette. Well, you know what? There's a better way to work. I'm going to hit the cancel button, and then I'm going to come across here to the layers palette, and I'm going to click this little black white icon at the top here, and then I'm going to come down and select levels. And you might have just seen what happened there. Instead of applying the command to the image, we've created this new layer on top of the image called levels 1, and this is called an adjustment layer, meaning that this layer will adjust everything below it in the layers palette using the settings we input into the specific command, so into this dialog box in this example. So everything we do now inside levels will be applied to this adjustment layer instead of the actual image itself, or instead of the actual layer itself, I should say. It's also great because we can come back and edit it whenever we like, and that's because an adjustment layer remembers the settings we've entered. I'll show you what I mean when we're done here, but for now, let me just explain what's going on inside the levels dialog box. What we've got here is a histogram, first and foremost, and it's showing us the distribution of brightness levels inside the image, ranging from black over here on the left hand side, which has a brightness level of 0, to white over here on the right hand side, which has a brightness level of 255. So we can surmise from looking at the histogram that we don't have any blacks in the image because there is no information at this point here. Likewise with the whites over this side of the histogram, we don't have any information, so the histogram tells us that there aren't any. So we haven't got any rich shadows or bright highlights in the photograph. We've got some dark colours that appear around here. That's probably representing the shadows in the wood over in this region of the photograph. Then we have loads of midtones, and we have stacks of midtones in fact inside this image, and they're probably made up from the lion itself and all the dirt in the background. They're all fairly neutral colours as it goes, and then the brightness levels drop down as we start to head towards white, and if we look over to the image, that's probably areas like the light fur we can see around the lion's face here and in places like this as well. Like I said though, if you want more information on all of this, then look no further than our huge series all about levels, which includes 2 pretty detailed tutorials on the histogram. Now the great thing about levels is that not only can we look at the distribution of brightness levels inside the image, we can also edit them via these little sliders underneath the histogram. So if I drag the black point slider up to 50 for example, we're turning all the pixels inside the image that previously had a brightness value of 50 or lower, we're turning them black. Same with the white point over here. If I drag that down to say 200, we're turning all of these pixels here, the ones that I'm highlighting on the histogram, we're turning them to pure white. We can then manipulate the midtones by dragging this slider around too. So we can make the midtones darker by dragging to the right, or lighter by dragging to the left. I'm going to go ahead and reset that to 1.0, which is the default setting. Now to get serious, I'm going to use a value of say 14 for the black point. Just going to butt this up to the start of the brightness levels, and then I'll press the tab key on the keyboard a couple of times to switch over to the white point, and I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to butt this back up to these brightness levels here until we get to a value of say 241. Now to see the difference we've made so far, we can uncheck this little preview box to see the before view of the photograph, and then click it again to see the after view, and you can see that already we've made a positive change to the image. Now every photograph that you take with a digital camera, or scan in using a flatbed scanner, or even download from the web for that matter, are 99.9% of the time going to be inside the RGB color space. So it's going to be an RGB image. And RGB is basically a really popular color model that uses 3 primary colors to represent all the rest of the colors on screen. Those primary colors being red, green and blue. As I say, it uses them to create every color you can display on your computer screen. It's very similar to how a television set represents color as well. But before we get too involved with that, here's my point. Here inside levels we have the ability to work inside any 3 of those primary colors, which gives us a huge amount of control when we're looking to fix color issues inside a photograph. Now once again, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but if you want more information on working inside these colour channels, as they're called, then check out video tutorial number 6 in that guide to levels available here at freephotoshop.com. The reason I'm touching on it here in this beginner's guide to Photoshop Elements is that it's such a crucial part of the software, specifically where colour and tonal adjustments are concerned, so at least you know that this stuff is possible. Now in order to make this photograph look great, we're going to have to enter the colour channels, and that's because, as I said, the colour channels are where we can fix colour issues, and if you look very closely to this image you'll notice that things are looking very red. There's almost a red cast associated with the entire photograph. So let's switch to the red channel first of all, and notice that as soon as we see this histogram here inside the red channel, we see a gap in this area of the histogram. Let's move the slider up just to see if we can make an improvement here, and we're able to remove that red cast by moving the slider up just like so. So here's with no change to the slider, and here's with our new values. Now we could accept the changes at this stage, but I want to make some further improvements by entering the green channel, seeing as it's the next one in line here. And here you can see that we have problems with both the dark and the light greens. So I'll move the shadows up a touch, say to 5, and then I'll bring the highlights in as well. And you can't really get a feel of how things are going to look until you've been to all 3 channels, but it's obvious at this point that if we draw this slider all the way in, we're going to change things too much. So I'll leave it at, say, 245 brightness levels. We can then come back in later if we need to, but for now that's fine. Next, let's enter the blue channel, and we can do more or less the same as we did inside the green channel, and we'll move the shadows up a touch to, say, 5. Then we'll bring the highlights to a value of, say, 245, like so, and things are looking pretty good. The only thing I'm not happy with though is, in my opinion, we've still got a slight red cast associated with the photograph. So I'll come back to the red channel and just move this mid-tone slider over to the right, say to a value of 0.04, and now I'm happy. Now the image is looking great. And this is going to happen quite a lot, by the way, when you're using levels, especially the channels inside levels, is you're going to flip over from one channel to the next until you get things looking the way you like it. I am going to press OK now to accept these changes. Now I'd like to saturate the colours inside the image just a touch, just to make this lazy lion more vivid, and I'll do that over here inside the layers palette by clicking on this adjustment layer icon once again, and then selecting the hue saturation command like so. Now I'm free just to drag this saturation slider to the right until I get to a value of, say, well, let's go for a value of 15, that looks pretty good. And I'm going to hit OK to accept that change, and we've now got 2 adjustment layers down here in the layers palette, one affecting the brightness levels of the image and the other affecting the saturation. And the great thing at this stage is that now, if I wanted to change the levels adjustment I made, I can just double click on the adjustment layer icon, and now the levels dialog box is going to come up, complete with the settings I've already applied. I could now change them around any way I need to, and then when I'm done hit OK, and my new settings will be applied. I'm going to press cancel though, because I don't want to make any changes to this image at this stage. I could also switch levels off, just to let you know here. I can also switch the visibility of levels off just by hitting this visibility icon, just like we did in the previous video with the switching off of the standard layers. We can also do that with adjustment layers. Just so many things you can do with levels and layers in general. Just a great way to work. Okay, I'm going to turn levels back on, and I've got one last thing to show you before we move on to the next video. When I applied that layer of saturation, by default I applied that saturation to the whole image. The trouble is, I only wanted to apply it to the lion. I didn't actually want to make the background or foreground of this image any more saturated. Luckily, Photoshop Elements allows me to choose where in the image I'm applying the saturation by providing me with this mask over here attached to the layer. At the moment you'll notice that the entire mask is white, meaning that we're allowing all of the contents of this adjustment layer to affect the image. If I want to protect a particular region of the image, I can simply mask it out, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and select the paintbrush from over here in the toolbox, and in order to mask an area out, we need a black brush. And we can get a black brush by clicking this little icon down here below the swatches. That will reset the swatches here to their default white foreground and black background colours. Now we need a black brush, so we need to switch these swatches around so that black is the foreground colour, and we can do that by hitting this little icon above the swatches. Perfect. Now I'm going to use the bracket keys to find the right size of brush for the job. I'd say something like this is good. Finally, I'm going to make the brush as soft as I can. Now I'll do that by coming up to this brush icon up here in the options bar, and then finding the hardness option and making sure that it's set at 0%. And then I'll just hit escape on the keyboard to close the options box and return to seeing the entire image. One last thing to do before we start painting, and that's to make sure we have the mask active in the layers palette. So I'll give it a click to be certain, and now I can just start painting away on the region of the image I don't want to be affected by this hue saturation adjustment layer. And you can spot where I'm painting by checking out the mask at any time. You should start to see regions of black appear like so. I'm going to take care around this wooden decking at the bottom of the image just to make sure I get everywhere I want to. And if at any stage we want to double check where we're actually painting, we can simply alt click the mask. That's an option click on the Macintosh, by the way. And if we spot any mistakes, then we can switch over to the white brush, and we can either use this little switch icon, or here's another way, we can just press the letter X on the keyboard, and now we're painting with white. I'm going to switch back to the black brush, however, and then I'll turn this mask preview off by alt clicking the mask on the PC. That's option clicking the mask on the Macintosh, and then I'm just going to finish things off in this area here. And that's looking pretty good, I'd say. And just keep an eye on the mask over here to see how things are going. Just a small version in my layers palette, but I'd say that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy to call that job done. Okay, once again, that kind of wraps up this video. We can now see the finished product on the screen, and I'd say that's looking just dandy. In the next video coming up, we're going to get down to some selecting, extracting, moving, transforming and blending right here inside Photoshop Elements. As always, thanks for joining me here at freephotoshop.com, and I'll see you in the next video.